Hi everyone, welcome to our revision lecture for our Families and Partnerships unit. I can't believe we're on our final week. So let's go through our main content that we have covered, and then when we're in the tutorials we will look at what this actually looks like in practice and how we can do some prep for our exam. So these were our topics that we're going to cover. We're looking at our theories associated with family and community partnerships. We then will look at barriers and how that impacts on our family and community partnerships. We're looking at effective communication, how we create good parent-friendly classrooms, and using technology effectively for that connection. So what were our outcomes for this unit? We wanted to explore strategies for working effectively with families in the community. We wanted to learn how to address potential barriers to teacher and family partnerships. We wanted to understand the importance of creating those positive family and teacher relationships. We wanted to show sensitivity for diversity and to learn about the considerations that we need to make. And we wanted to look at the research undertaken and theories developed in the field. So if we work from these core elements, that partnerships are a unique kind of relationship, that what we want to have is truly a partnership, not an imbalance of power. So we want this idea where each person in the partnership is equally valued for their knowledge and contribution. Oftentimes in a school, teachers and educators sometimes feel they have the power, and that parents often don't want to say something because they think they're going to do the wrong thing, get in trouble, the teachers won't like them, all those sorts of things. And sometimes teachers feel parents hold the power. We want to make sure that we're creating as much as possible that true partnership. So what we know is that if we're going to create amazing outcomes for kids, that we have to work together. There's no use when parents head off and get some testing done and don't inform the teachers, or when teachers are really worried and they don't inform the parents because they're a bit worried about the parents' reactions and so on. So caregivers and educators must work together, and when we involve other professionals, we have to make sure that we are creating that lovely, coordinated, integrated team. When that works well, gosh, it makes such a difference to the learning and potential being realised for every single student that you will work with. So some of our theories that we delved into. We looked a lot at Bronfenbrenner, and Bronfenbrenner in your text is the one that is really encapsulated and expanded upon in various ways. So Bronfenbrenner, remember, we look at how they support the involvement of the families. We look at those 5 environmental systems: the microsystems, mesosystems, exosystems, macrosystems, and chronosystems. Vygotsky dialectical theory looked at how our external social world impacts on a child's development, how we have this idea that human knowledge, it really is derived from culture. It's not just something that is made up in some way, and that with Vygotsky, we know about our zone of proximal development and how important that is to make sure that we take it into account when we are doing work with children. Our family systems theory looks at this idea as the child as the transformer and the transformed, and that whatever happens to one member of the family will affect all members, and that we make sure we take this into account when we're dealing with families in any way. So with our Bronfenbrenner, making sure that when we look at what is happening in a child's life, that is going to impact on all aspects of their development in different ways. So we have the individual that sits at the centre, but then everything impacts on them around that. So their mesosystem is the immediate things around them. So their neighbourhood, their family, their religion, their school, the services that they're attending, and so on. Their exosystem is the things that are one step removed from them. So you may find things that if they are in any type of social welfare services, so if they have people coming in to visit them and so on, these are all the external things that impact on a child's development. We then have the macro systems, and they are all our much broader things. So they are all our culture things that impact on them. So our societal beliefs and so on. And then our chronosystems are the historical events that have that big impact on all of those other things. I always look at the chronosystems will impact forward just like that arrow does. The microsystems that are impacting directly on it, they're the immediate things that you will see. When we're looking at vulnerable children who have been impacted by any of our exosystems and macrosystems, that is where you are going to see our intergenerational trauma starting to impact on things. It's where you're going to see racism at play in some way that will affect their reactions to different things. You will see various other cultural issues that will start to severely impact on the child itself. And it's not you that's doing it as a teacher, it's all of the external things that are happening, but we need to make sure as the educator that we are really taking into account and understanding all of those things, because sometimes we only go, oh, wonder what's happening in the family, whereas we need to look a little bit broader at certain times to understand what's impacting on them from a much broader perspective. So what we know is that communities are going to have lots of resources that we can have available to school and families, but we need to make sure that the school can also be that resource and making sure that we utilize whatever we can. And that's why you'll see some schools run those amazing breakfast clubs. We have after school sports that are run on school grounds. We have various community groups, we have homework groups. There's lots of those things because schools become those trusted places, and we want to utilize that because in some communities there's not a lot of places that our various members of the community will trust. So looking at things that will affect different families. So what we had is the idea that all of those issues can impact on a child's development, but also can impact on the family, which we know, if we look at the family systems theory, anything that impacts on one member of the family will impact on all members of the family. So if there is abuse happening in any sort, it will, and it might not be happening to the child in your class, but it's happening to the mother, that will impact on the child in your class. If the family is in economic stress, so dad has lost his job or mum has been retrenched from her job or her hours have been dramatically changed and they're getting a lot less money in, those economic issues, we know that causes enormous stress on a family. So gender roles where you will have certain things happening by certain members of the family and then they're being presented with different things at school, all of those will impact on the way that families interact and the children are interacting with you. So what that comes down to a lot is the way that we define our culture. So we want to make sure that we are looking at all of those major components of culture. We're looking at values, we're looking at language, we're looking at nonverbals, we're making sure that we recognize culture, and we're looking at that much broader view of it all. So when we look at culture, we also want to make sure that we are considering First Nations people, the Aboriginal people in Australia. We're making sure that we know who in our class identifies as being Aboriginal and that we are making sure we are providing the best educational opportunities for them and that we are not perpetuating any stereotypes. We're making sure that we understand the issues that are affecting First Nations people and that we are not contributing to them, but we are actively making sure that we are minimising and undoing some of the things by the way that we are acting, by the way that we are communicating, by the way that we are embracing families. We are not dismissing things because, oh, that's what they do. It's not. It's something that we make sure that all of us as educators are understanding and doing the right thing by every child that you are interacting with. We're making sure that we are providing equity and equality, making sure that we have equality of opportunity, equality of condition, and equality of outcome. And that sometimes that means you are not providing equal to every single student, because providing equal means you are not balancing it out. Some children need to be given more or different to make sure that they are receiving an equality of opportunity. So being really aware that you have a way of communicating that to your leadership team potentially, to other parents if necessary, to have an understanding of what and why you are doing things in your classroom to create true equality and equity for every student who is entering in your room. And that you are making sure that you are not unconsciously creating an unequal situation that does not provide equity. It's all right to create an unequal situation if it provides equity, but it's understanding how sometimes giving every child exactly the same thing does not create equity. Making sure that we understand the difference between absolute poverty and relative poverty, and that you may have children in your class who are operating from, definitely you will have nearly every single school that you'll be at, you'll have some children with relative poverty. You may have children with absolute poverty, depending on the area that you go to work in. So being really aware of that, and how that for most of you is not something you have grown up with. So understanding how you interact with families, because particularly absolute poverty, it will be a real issue. What we know with poverty is that if children are raised in poverty, they're likely to be undernourished, they're likely to have less availability of housing. And with our current rental crisis, I'm just hearing of so many more families that are bonding together with multiple families in one home because they cannot afford to have everyone have their own house. And that is such a sad indictment of what's going on at the moment. Now, poverty is intergenerational quite often, and a lot of families are having this for the first time now. And we know that if mothers have lots of issues with money at the time of or leading into pregnancy, that they're less likely to receive good care, and that means that their babies might not have the same opportunities as potentially they could have if they had a little bit more financial assistance. So we need to help find ways to keep those families out of that horrible poverty cycle. One of our next things that we have is divorce. So remember, whatever impacts on one person in the family impacts on all of them. So divorce and separation, we know that the lead up to a divorce, or the lead up, I should say, to a separation, is often the trickiest time. That's when the caregivers are going through their angst and their anger and neglect potentially of children, as they're very wrapped up in their own emotions and so on. So oftentimes we will see behaviours exhibited by the children long before any of the caregivers had told us that they are going through a separation. So the younger the child is, the more that you are likely to see strange behaviours come out of them, because they are not able to process or understand what's going on. And as they start to move into their different custody issues and the different places that the children live and so on, we need to be really conscious of the impact of that. So things for us to be really aware of: we have to always be sensitive to what's going on. Keep an eye on the dramatic play area, keep an eye on what they're drawing and what they're saying and so on. And really that second dot point of keeping the lines of communication open. The more that we know what's going on in a family, the more likely it is that we can start to counteract some of those things, give them a little bit more time, give them a little bit more attention at school and so on. If things move into some poor custody disputes, then we need to be really aware of it and make sure that we have plans and strategies in place, because I've been part of those where it gets quite violent and very, very scary for everyone involved. So you have to know what you as an educator are allowed to do and what the school is obligated to do as well. So keeping both parents clearly informed about child's progress is important, and planning generic events, making sure that you don't restrict access inadvertently. checking out what the school has for things such as Rainbows programs, Seasons for Growth. There's various programs that schools run. Different schools run different ones. So check out what they have, because as a divorce starts to happen, or even just a separation starts to happen, then the children do go through quite a strong amount of grief, and we need to give them opportunities to express that in different ways. So then we move on to our special needs children, as well as any special needs that may be happening with the family in any other way. So knowing as an educator, what are your steps for referral if you are worried about a particular child, understanding our need for documentation, that we must have all of our observations, we must have all of our records really up to date and quite detailed if we are at all worried about a child, or that we're going, wow, they're doing things that we are not expecting at this age if they're performing well above expected levels, and how we can best support that as well. So don't forget that we often keep in mind really well the children who are not performing well, or who are not meeting all our milestones that we expect, but think about the children who are moving beyond the expected milestones and how we cater for them in the best way possible. Always keep in mind our siblings and other family members that are also going through issues when a child has special needs. Particularly, I find the younger children, when they're going through those big emotional outbursts and so on, that they are often having siblings look at them and go, why are they getting away with that? And you may find the siblings start to act up as well, because they're watching the older brother or sister or younger brother or sister go through these big emotional outbursts, and they're getting all the attention. So the siblings decide to do the same type of behaviours. Make sure that you are doing good research and link it into theory, so that you really are not just going on, well, that's very weird. No, you link it into what are the developmental milestones that the child is meeting or moving beyond or not meeting, and make sure that that links into what you know, and do a little bit of research and work out how you can best support the child, or how you can move them on for different referrals and so on. Now, with child abuse is something that you are likely to encounter. It doesn't matter what school you work at. It doesn't occur more or less in different areas or anything like that. That is a whole lot of stereotypes that we have. But we know with child abuse that it is not just sexual abuse. It could be that emotional or physical actions or inactions, and anything that causes harm or injury to the child. Every school has a mandatory reporting process that we must go through. So it's very important that you know what that process is. It's something that you will need to do a course for most of you, even potentially before you go on prac, but also definitely once you start teaching, and I think it's every year that you have to do it, just to make sure it is always clear in your mind what we do, why we do it, and when we do it. It is not something that we go, oh, I'm a little bit worried about that. They've said this. No, those are things we report. We do not ignore them. We do not brush them under the carpet. We do not think, oh, they're a lovely family. That wouldn't be happening. We make sure that we follow our processes. There's been too many times in history where we have not followed processes because we thought something different. We have to follow our processes, and that's why we have mandatory reporting in place, hence the word mandatory. So make sure that you are always looking at what are the processes in your school, even when you are on prac, to know who you have to say something to immediately. Now, communication is our key to making sure that we are creating those beautiful relationships with all caregivers and all community members. So making sure that we are communicating effectively, and that we are encouraging anyone that we interact with to communicate effectively with us, because our messages are made up of those three elements. It's made up, yes, of course, of our words, but most of what we communicate is made up of our body language and our vocal stimuli, being our pitch, our loudness, and our speed. So making sure that when you are communicating with small children, that you are using really appropriate body language and vocal stimuli, and that if you know children have particular issues with loudness, you monitor that. You know that the words that you say must match your body language. So make sure that if you are not having your message understood really well by others around you, talk to some people about it and say, what am I doing? How am I not showing this? And it might be that people are not able to articulate it for you, but they're like, something's just off. And it could be that what you're saying, you're not genuinely believing, and that's coming across in your body language. Or you're feeling really nervous about things and caregivers aren't sure what you mean, and so on. So make sure when you're communicating, you are nice and clear about things. Please think, how do you make sure that you are creating good family-friendly classrooms? Make sure it is accessible at all times. Make sure you have clear parent areas. Make sure that you have some goodbye places, some displays, information cards. You have set up some good communication strategies. So some ways of enhancing that. Have a really nice open door policy. It might be that for the first part of term 1, you want to keep your children quite close to you and establish all your routines and your processes. But then after the first few weeks, once you've got the children all settled and they know what's going on and so on, start your parent roster, put it up, allow people to pop in, create some way that you are having good communication and that it is nice and regular. Apologies for all that. I'm looking at all these little errors as I go through. I'll fix them up in the other slides. Make sure that you have some information nights at the beginning of the year in some way or at regular points through the year. Create some way for the parents to connect, oftentimes nominating one parent, and then they might set up a Facebook group or a WhatsApp or a whatever is their process that they use, even just a list of mobile numbers or email accounts and so on. Usually as a teacher, you can't share those with the parents, but you can get one parent and nominate them to do that. Think about resources that you can have, career days, letters, all those sorts of things to really develop that relationship with them. Now, technology can be a fabulous way for you to create an even better relationship with lots of the parents. So think about how you can use technology. So think about Seesaw, Story Park, whatever is the app that your school is using. Most schools will use Seesaw. Lots of centres, childcare centres will have their own communication strategy in some way. They'll have an app, they'll have communication, they'll have lots of things going on. So when we're talking about technology in our classrooms, make sure that you are using language that is appropriate. So we're avoiding games, we're avoiding that low-level use in our early years, and we're making sure that whatever technology is being used in a way to enhance the learning. So when you go out and visit your prac school, find out what they have and ask if you can be added into things. So ask if you can be added into the Seesaw class. Ask if you can be added into the whatever process that they are using in the school. So see what and how they are using technology and see if you can tag into it. Now, in terms of partnerships generally, it's not just a collection of strategies. It's not just a bit of a program. It's not an add-on. It's what you genuinely believe. And this is why I think I get so upset when I see early years teachers who don't want to have parents in the classroom. Because if you can get caregivers on your side, it just creates such a fabulous atmosphere for the children, and it does truly become a true partnership. When you want to keep the door closed and you don't want to have parents in and you don't want to have parent support of any sort and you want to do a kiss and ride and not have them come in, it just makes life so much harder when you need to talk to parents about anything that is impacting on their child's development in any way. Whereas if you can have those informal meetings and discussions first, then when you do want to meet with them, it's so much easier. We know that parents are very busy. They've got lots on. Lots of parents are working now due to financial issues. But you will have somebody dropping the child off. There's rarely a child that is dropped off and picked up every single day by daycare or after school care. It's usually a caregiver of some sort, mum, dad, big brother, it might be auntie, uncle, grandparents, and so on. But the child will be dropped off and picked up by somebody who cares about them. So make sure that you take the time to get to know who that is and what days it's happening. So then you can have those informal discussions rather than always having to have really formal meetings about everything. You just want to be able to have those little informal discussions to make sure that you are meeting the best needs of every child. So our exam. The exam, we have made sure that it is online. So it will be online on the date and time that will be hopefully the same date and time, but I'm not guaranteeing it. And it will be open book. So there are 4 questions in the exam. All the questions are compulsory. A couple of them have like an A and a B part to them as well. Each question is worth 10 marks, being the 40 marks for the final part of your assessment. You've got 2 hours and 10 minutes. Obviously, my wonderful lap people, you will have extra. And just so you know, the AI detection, so if you use ChatGPT, it's even picking up sometimes Grammarly and so on. It is turned on automatically for all Turnitin submissions, so I will get a percentage by which it is detected. So please make sure that you are not just putting the questions through ChatGPT. Make sure that you are modifying, changing, using our notes, all those sorts of things to give the best answer possible for it. We will have 10 possible topics that we will be discussing in tutorial after our presentations, and those topics will be the topics for the exam. So you'll be able to copy and paste and gather some things together for yourself so you can give me some really good answers. We'll talk more about the exam in our tutorials coming up this week. So that is our last lecture. Hopefully you are all feeling prepared to develop some great partnerships with the parents that you will be meeting on your prac and once you go out at whatever time that you are finishing, because I know for some of you, you'll be finishing at the end of term 3 and other people will be finishing at the end of the year and will be starting to look for their full-time jobs. I will see you all in our tutorials in either on campus or in our online tutorials. Thank you for an amazing, fabulous, easy semester, and I will see you all in class.